And what Satan is trying to attack in your life is God's goodness. I'll tell you a story. I told you all about how in the year 2018, God gave me a prophecy about birthing my son. In the year 2020, he said I'll get pregnant in 2019, and in 2020 I was going to have a baby. Now, this is my second son, so I'd waited 7 years before him. Now, the thing about the process of conception and the process of birthing is that naturally it takes a lot from a woman. Now, I didn't go through the natural process. I had to go through an IVF process because there was a lot of warfare attached to the natural process in my life. And then by the time I finally did get pregnant, after 6 months of being stimulated, at that point my body was consistently shaking. I was so hormonal, and finally came out with just one egg. I was disappointed. I was afraid. Satan sought to. If you were a woman, look at what would have come out of your life. Satan told me all kinds of lies. As though that was not enough, the child that I had tried to conceive for so long, we then went through a process where the baby almost died. And I was told back to back that it may not make it to 35 weeks or even come out of the womb. But I told you the testimony of how that child that lost 90% of his amniotic fluid at 23 weeks made it to 36 weeks. And in the midst of that process, yes, you can put your hands together for Jesus. But in the midst of that process, something was happening to me. And I need you to hear me clearly, because it will explain to you what you feel every time I preach. In the midst of that process, I was being broken. Many days I will cry. When I said to the doctor, this womb is not a graveyard, I wasn't taking a stance of power. I was crying. Tears were coming down my eyes uncontrollably. I could not understand. I was shaking. I remember in the hospital, my elder sister came, my husband, and they rushed me, airport straight. I was so afraid. By the time I got to the airport, my doctor, my IVF doctor came with a wheelchair and said, sit down. And I said, I can't sit on a wheelchair. In my mind, I thought, this is PI of the Most High. Wheelchair? How is that going to look? And she said to me, Pastor, you better sit down. You have only 10% of amniotic fluid left. We are not about to lose it with you walking to and fro the airport. And I remember as I was about to sit down, I was so ashamed. And I heard the voice of God say to me, he said, do you remember the story of David? He said, do you remember when David was running from Saul? How David pretended to be a madman. And David that we speak about, the key to the house of David, David was drooling from the corners of his mouth. And he pretended as though he was mad to escape. And the Lord said to me, that this that you have to do does not disqualify your future. Neither does it reduce your worth or your power. This is but a tool that we need to escape what Satan has orchestrated for you in Nigeria. He said, sit on that wheelchair and appear as weak as you need to appear. He said, because you need to leave this nation now. So I sat on that wheelchair. I told you how I got to America, then got to Canada. That baby came out. Now, what I didn't say to you is, after the baby, I went into what I finally realized later, according to medical professionals, was postpartum depression. So after the baby, I would sit down and I would just cry consistently. I could know. My mother would say, what is it? What is wrong? The baby you have been waiting for is here. I was always weeping. I was exhausted. I was tired. The warfare had been long. It had been long. All I just wanted to do was rest. But the baby wasn't going to let me rest. It was always crying. And so I'm like, Lord Jesus, when do I get peace to myself? In that season, I forgot I was ordained. I forgot I was anointed. If I was walking in a mall and you said apostle, I will not answer. Because as far as I was concerned, it wasn't me you were talking to. I don't know if somebody is with me. I went to a depth of weakness I had never experienced in my life. Then COVID hit a month after the baby. So I was isolated in Canada. And you know what isolation does. So I didn't have my team. I didn't have my structure. I didn't have my people with me. So while the world was, going into what he was going through, and people would message me, Pastor, what do we do? What's the Lord saying? In my heart, I'm like, you tell me, because I don't know what the Lord is saying. And a part of me was so bitter by the fact that God would allow me go through that. I'm a warrior by nature. I like to fight. Do you understand? I just love it because I understand that life is warfare. So there is nothing in my life I take for granted. Not a single word that is spoken or an action or a wicked eye turned towards me. I will report you to Jesus. I don't know if you understand what I'm talking about. Oh yes. So I then get into this season where all of that was happening and I could not find my bearing. And then in the midst of it, I was 98% sure that my marriage was going to end. We were going through such a rough patch. We were so broken. My husband was stuck in Nigeria, I was stuck in Canada. And every time we spoke, it was pain, it was anger, it was fear, I was shaking. All kinds of things were happening. I remember there would be days I would lay on the floor there in Canada and I would weep for an hour. And I would be singing songs like, the one I love is always before me, and his seal is upon my heart. I live for the one that I love. I would sing that song over and over and over again because I was trying to convince my spirit of its consecration. I was trying to convince my soul of its ordination. I was reminding my mind who I belong to. I would sing those songs over and over again because I understood that something was about to be stolen from me. Satan wanted to touch my garment. Satan wanted to take my mantle. Satan wanted to corrupt my office. My heart entered into places of bitterness I did not know was possible. My heart went into places of fear I had never seen before. When people speak about problems with the mind, I tell them, trust me, I am not speaking from a place of heartlessness towards your problem. I am speaking because I have been there. I am telling you of the Jesus that I have seen, I have heard, I have touched, and I have handled. I know where the line is drawn, where the mind of a person can cross over that line and they will say she lost her mind. I have been there. I've seen that line. I know what it is like to be in thick darkness. Darkness that is like a cloak over you. And you cannot lift your head. Your times and seasons are manipulated by hell and darkness. I've been there. But in all of it, my greatest pain wasn't the pain. My greatest pain was that I felt that Jesus had left me. My greatest pain was that I saw that in myself was a possibility to believe that God can fill me. I couldn't. It was too hard for me to bear. I said, I have never been in a place where I doubted God. I have never been in a place where my convictions concerning Jesus' love and faithfulness towards me has been questioned. I've been through so much before, but I'd never arrived there. So my greatest issue wasn't my struggle with men. It was my struggle with God. My biggest problem wasn't the fact that I knew men had disappointed me, but I was so disappointed in myself that I could believe that God would disappoint me. That was my issue, because I'm nothing without Jesus. He has been the foundation and the content of my life. He has been my light and my glory. He has been my passion, my sustenance. He has been my honor. Jesus has been everything to me. To get to a point where I felt like I lost Jesus. It felt like I lost everything. For the first time in my life, I was afraid of dying. I never used to be afraid of dying. Because to live is Christ, to die is gain. But for the first time, I thought if I were to cross the divide between time and eternity, would the master still look at me and say, well done? To not be sure of Jesus' stand towards me was my biggest pain. I hated everything. I was so angry at the fact that anything or anybody had the potential to bring me to that place. And I struggled. And Satan took advantage of my struggle. Satan took advantage of my crisis. The kind of attacks I had not had in years, I started having it. The kind of nighttime oppression I had never experienced, I started experiencing it. Sometimes I would roll from the bed to the floor wailing. And I remember one day when my mind was so attacked and I was shaking, I would open my eyes and I would see things. I would close. I didn't know, can I open my eyes? Either open or shut. My vision was compromised. I remember I stayed on the floor and I was wailing with groanings. And I said, God, this is how you are. Would this be the end of my life? Is this what people will say about me? I said, I have served you since I was 18. I have given you my entire life. I have followed you as much as I can. I have trusted you with my entire being. I said, this is how you are. Would they say that she died without a testimony? Would they say that she lost her mind because of pain? And I was weeping. You would think that in that moment, I would hear the voice from heaven thundering and saying, I am your Lord. Guess what I heard? Nothing. Hear me. Every time it seems like God is silent, God is building your conviction concerning his presence. Just because he's not speaking doesn't mean he's not present. I can be in this room with you and say nothing. You can ride in a car with me and carry the entire strength of who I am and the backing of my presence with you. My protection, my favor will be with you as long as you are in the car with me. But I may not say a word. There are so many people that have wrongly quoted God and the intentions of God because they did not hear the voice. But God's strongest voice is not just in the words that he says, but in himself that he gives to you. Because there was not a single day in that moment that I prayed for a person and did not see results. There was not a single time that somebody came to me with a trouble that the bowels of compassion did not rise up within me and I provoked heaven for a release. There was not a day in the midst of that my oil did not function. But the container was broken, yet the oil was potent. People, listen. Don't ever let Satan lie to you. Don't ever let him lie to you that you are not who God says you are. Pain is not a disqualifier, but it is the examination by which men are qualified for authority. Because at the end of the day, I found out that I was not just birthing Judah, but I was birthing a mantle. I was not just birthing Judah, I was birthing a mandate. But God had reached a point where it was not just a mandate that would be given to me, but a mandate that I would become. So that everywhere that I enter, people say when you minister, I have encounters. Someone said to me, it's like an out-of-body experience. And I said to them, you don't get it. I am no longer alive like I used to be. I died in 2020. The life that I now live, I live by faith in the Son of God. I am a manifestation of the sustenance of Jesus. The same way they said my baby's amniotic fluid had finished, but he was carried within the container of grace. That's the same way I am now carried within the container of mercy. So that everywhere I go, I am not just a woman. I am now the realm of mercy, grace, and truth that I encountered. I received it. I stopped wrestling with the goodness of God, and it has made me who I am today. Elakame sovegai. Kuba keba kabarush kebalahai. Iskadekre itoto belika kabia kazgove gedele baradaso. Every lie of hell, every scheme of darkness that seeks to disqualify you from the blessing of the new day, we come against it in the name of Jesus. For there is power in the blood to restore, to redeem, to rewire the configuration of the mind of a woman. There is power in the blood to reposition you into stature and strength. There is power in the blood to provoke the glory of God over your life. Somebody put your hands together and shout, I am a warrior.